So you need to run a tabletop exercise but don't know where to start? Well, you're in the right place. This video will cover what they are, why they're beneficial, who should be involved, and how to conduct them. We'll also discuss best practices for facilitating after-action reviews and reports following your tabletop exercise to help you document lessons learned and create an improvement plan. I'm really glad you're here. Let's dive in. Most companies have documented emergency response plans for various business risks, but how often are they assessed and revised? Do those plans hold up when put to the test in drills or simulations? Answering these questions is critical to ensure your emergency response plans are effective and easy to execute in an actual crisis, which is the approach we'll focus on in this video. We'll discuss proven strategies for facilitating highly impactful tabletop exercises to help your organization better prepare for any number of potential threats to your people and business, identify potential gaps in your response plans so you can proactively address them, and ensure your emergency response teams are informed and aligned on everyone's role during an actual crisis. I'm Peter Steinfeld, Senior Vice President of Safety Solutions at AlertMedia. Since 2001, I've spent a substantial amount of time helping thousands of companies, including some of the world's largest brands, develop strategies to assess risks, improve emergency preparedness, and communicate faster when an emergency strikes. In the simplest terms, a tabletop exercise, or tabletop drill, is an interactive exercise and simulation designed to test an organization's emergency response procedures. It's called a tabletop exercise because, well, you probably guessed it, it usually takes place around a table, or in a classroom or conference room setting. A designated facilitator guides participants through a hypothetical, yet realistic, emergency scenario. The group details and discusses what steps must take place to respond to the incident, ensure everyone's safety, and restore normal operations as quickly as possible. Unlike full-scale drills, a tabletop exercise is specifically designed to be a low-risk, low-stress, and a low-cost way to ensure your team knows exactly what their role is during an emergency and what's expected of them in a real organizational crisis. Studies have consistently shown that the specific scenario planning that occurs during tabletop exercises saves organizations tens of millions of dollars every year. In fact, according to OSHA, businesses save an average of $4 to $6 for every dollar invested into workplace safety programs. You heard that correctly, $4 to $6 in cost savings for every dollar spent. In addition to being cost-effective, you can conduct a tabletop exercise anywhere, in person or virtually, which makes them great for hybrid teams and organizations with distributed safety and security functions. Another reason tabletop exercises are so effective is because they help eliminate confusion in an actual emergency, when critical decisions must be made quickly. Oftentimes, these decisions will either prevent or perpetuate disastrous outcomes. It doesn't matter if it's a structure fire, natural disaster, or an act of workplace violence. The heat of the moment is not the time for your people to question what they're supposed to do and when. A common question we get at AlertMedia is, who should be involved in a tabletop exercise? Let's quickly cover the 4 most common roles assigned to the individuals at the table. Role number 1 is the facilitator. The facilitator is the most critical role in a tabletop exercise, and one you should carefully consider. Think of the facilitator as an orchestra conductor, the person who controls the pace and flow of the program. The facilitator's most important responsibility is to move the conversation forward and, if needed, engage participants who may hang back from expressing their thoughts. A good facilitator is both an active listener and a non-threatening communicator who can generate feedback from the group. This person will ask stakeholders questions throughout the exercise to encourage deeper thinking about potential issues that might arise during a crisis. A facilitator's goal is to ensure all participants have expressed their perspectives and any potential issues are sufficiently discussed and explored. Role number 2 is the participant. Tabletop exercises are not passive events. Participants should be willing to jump into the conversation as needed, which is their primary responsibility. The exercise will be most successful if everyone embraces the objectives of the scenario at hand. It's important that all participants stay engaged in the exercise and feel like their voices are heard. We already discussed that a primary goal of a tabletop exercise is to identify gaps in emergency plans, so participants should feel comfortable speaking up or asking questions without derailing the exercise. Role number 3 is the evaluator. Evaluators play an essential role in documenting the outcomes of the tabletop exercise. It's their job to highlight both positive actions taken during the scenario, as well as areas for improvement. Evaluators are also often involved in developing the after-action report, which we'll talk more about later in the video. Role number 4 is the observer. Their role is to passively follow the tabletop exercise proceedings and offer additional perspectives or expertise not represented in your list of participants. Observers often include members from departments or teams that have a vested interest in your emergency response procedures but are not directly involved. Departments like HR, corporate communications, and IT are just a few examples. Here's a pro tip to keep in mind. Observers are there to add value, not sit idle. Make sure observers know they can answer questions or give feedback as appropriate when prompted by the larger group. Alright, we've talked about the who, what, and why for tabletop exercises. Now let's discuss the how. Step 1. Determine what you want to test. The first step in any tabletop exercise is determining which part of your plan you want to examine. Typically, this involves evaluating your organization's existing business continuity or emergency response plan and deciding which specific elements need updates or improvements. For example, the plan may be outdated, too generic, or simply no longer aligned with your organization's structure. This assessment will allow you to design an exercise that adequately explores whether the chosen part of your plan meets any newly discovered requirements. Step 2. Establish your goals. You've probably heard the expression, put good in, get good out. The same is true for facilitating a good tabletop exercise. Spend time clearly defining your goals and designing the exercise so that it's a good use of everyone's time. This is a critical step to earn engagement from the team. Start by documenting the scope, area or areas of focus, and your objectives. If you're new to this, we have a handy tabletop exercise template linked in the description below, with exact details on what to include. Once you've completed your exercise brief using the template, share it with participants and observers in advance of the exercise so everyone is on the same page about how their time will be spent. Step 3. Develop your scenario and script. It's important to choose a scenario that is tailored to your organization's specific goals and risks when developing your tabletop exercise. For example, a California-based organization may choose to focus on an earthquake, while a Florida-based organization may design an exercise for a hurricane. Whatever the scenario, the tabletop drill should include sufficient details to simulate the types of complications that often occur during that actual crisis. Things like considering how your plan must change if a key team member is unreachable, a critical supplier is disrupted, or another incident occurs while you're still responding to the first one. The more realistic your scenario is, the more valuable your outputs will be. Step 4. Run the exercise. Your exercise should take place in a distraction-free environment during a time when all participants can fully invest in the discussion. This is important whether your exercise is in person or virtual. Begin by reading your exercise brief, introducing everyone's role, and reminding all participants of the goals and objectives. The facilitator should ask a series of pointed questions throughout the exercise so that the participants' responses meet your stated objectives. Here are some examples. Ask participants to clarify who has the authority to activate specific components of the plan. Which channels or solutions should be used to communicate critical information? Who sends the information, and who is on standby if that person is unable to perform their duties? Are response procedures fully documented in case a stand-in is required to perform specific actions? How will you confirm that the response plan has been successfully executed? This can all feel a bit tedious, but it's critical that you take time to fully explore each step of your response plan. Here's another pro tip for you. If something is discussed in the room that's not represented in the plan, be certain to capture those details before moving on. Let's take a minute here to talk about injects, which are often used in tabletop exercises. An inject refers to new information injected into the tabletop drill during the exercise, which requires participants to think on their feet. Injects should only be known to the facilitator in advance of the exercise and introduced as new information for everyone else in the room. Think of injects as potential scenarios that would further complicate and test the resilience of your response plans. For example, if you're testing your pandemic plan, an inject may involve receiving a report of an outbreak at one of your facilities, or key personnel becoming incapacitated due to illness. These complications are meant to make the exercise feel more like an actual crisis event, which is rarely predictable. A great inject will require participants to think outside the box and give you valuable insights into whether your response plan will hold up in an emergency. Step 5. Conduct an after-action review. Congratulations! You've completed the tabletop exercise. The next step, and arguably the most important, is to document everything you've learned. The best way to do this is to conduct an after-action review. A good after-action review records what went well and what didn't, highlighting opportunities to improve both your response plan and your next tabletop exercise. Before you release your team from the room, ask all participants and observers for feedback like, what went well during the exercise? What did you learn? Are there other issues or concerns you'd like to discuss that weren't raised? What aspects of our plan require the most immediate attention? How can we improve future exercises and drills? Step 6. Complete an after-action report. As a best practice, you should also hand out an evaluation form and provide time for everyone to capture their feedback in writing. This will inform your formal after-action report. An after-action report will help you identify an improvement plan for any weaknesses or gaps you identified in your tabletop exercise. It details lessons learned and recommendations for future planning, training, and exercises. It can also help you build upon the strengths of your response plan to help you be more prepared for this specific emergency in the future. If you've never created an after-action report, we invite you to use our free template linked in the description below. Here's one last pro tip. It's important to conduct both the after-action review and after-action report as quickly as possible after completing your exercise. The faster you document lessons learned and opportunities to improve, the better off your organization will be. I really hope these strategies for designing and facilitating impactful tabletop exercises are helpful to you and your team. When executed correctly, tabletop exercises are a useful tool for emergency planners everywhere. With some preparation and foresight, this low-cost planning tool can help your organization better prepare for an emergency, communicate faster during critical events, and take action with confidence. Thanks again for joining me, and from all of us at AlertMedia, stay safe out there.